I was heading back from the garage on Thursday evening when I overheard Emily chuckling in the living room. It wasn't her usual laugh. It was sharp, unsettling enough to make me pause in the hallway instead of entering. She had 3 friends over, and I caught Sarah asking about the photographer they'd booked. Yes, a photographer, for a divorce reveal celebration. Let me rewind to explain how we reached this point, because it's going to sound bizarre, and I want you to grasp the full context. Emily and I have been married for 8 years. We met in college when I was pouring my energy into a startup with 2 friends from my computer science program. She was studying business administration, and we clicked at an entrepreneurial networking event. Back then, I was brimming with ambition, and she seemed genuinely thrilled about my vision. We tied the knot 6 months after graduating, young and naive, believing love would carry us through. Here's where things get messy. My startup didn't just flop, it crashed spectacularly. We'd secured some early funding from an angel investor, and I persuaded Emily to relocate across the country to be near better opportunities. But the whole venture collapsed when our main investor backed out, and my partners jumped ship for corporate jobs. I was 24, barely married a year, stuck in a pricey city with no income and a wife who'd uprooted her life for my dream. Emily landed a sales job at a tech firm within 2 weeks. She excelled at it, truly excelled. Within 3 years, she was pulling in 6 figures with bonuses and climbing the corporate ladder. Meanwhile, I was juggling freelance gigs and trying to launch another business. Every attempt fizzled out. I'd get close to something promising, only for it to collapse, market changes, outdated tech, or a competitor beating me to the punch. I wasn't lazing around gaming all day, as Emily started hinting to her friends. I was grinding on these projects, but effort and income aren't the same, and Emily was covering nearly everything. Rent for our place, groceries, her car payments and mine, insurance, all of it. I chipped in what I could from freelance work, maybe 20% of our expenses in a good year, but I could sense her bitterness growing. It started subtly, comments about how exhausted she was from supporting us. Then came jabs at dinner parties about bankrolling a dependent. Eventually, they weren't jabs anymore. She'd come home from work, and I'd catch her staring at me with a mix of disdain and disgust, like I was something clinging to her shoe. I'll admit I wasn't a flawless husband during this time. I was down, frustrated, furious at myself for failing repeatedly, but I kept pushing. I was applying for jobs, pitching ideas, taking freelance work. It just never measured up for her. Nothing was enough once she'd labeled me a failure. About a year ago, I landed a steady remote job with decent pay, not stellar but solid. I started contributing more to our bills. Emily barely noticed. By then, she'd already emotionally detached from our marriage. She'd stay late at work constantly. She'd take weekend trips with her girlfriends. She'd spend hours texting and laughing at messages she never shared with me. I knew something was brewing, I just didn't know what. So, Thursday evening, I'm standing in the hallway, listening to my wife strategize her exit with her 3 best friends. Sarah was asking about the photographer again, and Emily explained she wanted professional shots of the moment she told me she was done. Not just for herself, but to share. She wanted my reaction captured when she declared she was finished with me. Laura asked for specifics, and Emily laid it out. She was throwing herself a party, a celebration with friends, but really her liberation party. Her escape from 8 years tethered to a useless husband who couldn't provide. She'd rented a small venue for Saturday night and invited about 30 people, friends, coworkers, some family. Everyone but me, obviously. Her plan was to lure me there under a pretense. She'd say it was a surprise party for her work promotion, and I needed to arrive at 7 p.m. sharp. When I walked in, everyone would shout surprise, and then Emily would drop her bombshell. She'd announce to the crowd that she was leaving me, that she was finally free, that she'd been dragging around dead weight for nearly a decade and was done. Claire asked if Emily was worried I'd cause a scene, and Emily laughed. She said I was too pitiful to do anything but maybe cry or plead. She hoped I'd plead, actually, because it would make the photos even better. She wanted to immortalize the moment she reclaimed her life from the loser she'd married. Sarah mentioned Derek, asked if he'd be there. Emily got animated talking about him. She'd been seeing this guy, Nathan, for about 4 months. He's an executive at another tech company. Lives in a downtown penthouse. Drives a luxury car. Everything I wasn't and didn't have. Emily said Nathan would be at the party but would stay discreet until after her announcement. Then he'd come over, put his arm around her, and everyone would see she was leveling up. They discussed logistics for a bit. The photographer would be positioned to capture my face during her speech. Laura offered to record it on her phone as a backup. They'd ordered a custom cake that said Liberation on it. Emily had even bought a new dress, something pricey and stunning, because she wanted to look radiant when she crushed me in front of dozens. I stood there in the hallway taking in every word. And here's the twist nobody knows. Here's what makes this situation wild. I wasn't shocked. I wasn't even surprised, really. I'd watched Emily drift away for over a year, the late nights, the secretive texting, the way she looked at me like I was trash. But more crucially, I'd been preparing for something like this for a long time. See, the house we live in isn't a rental. It's a 3-bedroom home in a nice area that my grandmother willed to me when she passed 5 years ago. Emily moved in with me, and we've lived there since. But here's what she doesn't know and never asked. The house is in my name alone. Inherited property, never added her to the deed. Emily covers most of our daily expenses, but she's been living in my house rent-free for 5 years. She assumes it's ours together. She's made comments about our home and our equity. But legally, she has no claim to it. I confirmed this with a lawyer 2 years ago when our marriage started souring. The lawyer verified that in our state, inherited property remains separate unless I explicitly add her to the deed, which I didn't. I've been holding this card, waiting. Not because I'm some mastermind, but because I wanted to be sure before acting. Hearing her plan my public demolition with her friends while gushing about her affair partner gave me that certainty. I walked into the living room. All 4 froze and stared at me, guilt written across their faces. I smiled and asked if they needed anything, drinks, snacks, whatever. Emily recovered quickly, saying they were fine. I nodded and headed upstairs to our bedroom. I pulled out my phone and started making moves. First, I called my lawyer, asking him to finalize eviction papers for Emily to be served Sunday morning. He drafted them months ago when I first explored my options. He just needed my green light to file. I gave it. Then I called a property management company I'd contacted about renting out the house if needed. Asked about changing the locks on Sunday. They said they'd have someone there by 9 a.m. Then I called my bank. Removed Emily as an authorized user on my accounts. She had her own accounts for her salary, but she'd been on mine for household expenses. I cut her off effective immediately. I handled a few other things, canceled the shared phone plan and opened a new one for myself, transferring my number. Her phone would stop working by Saturday evening. I logged into our streaming services and revoked her access. Petty, maybe, but I was done letting her use anything tied to me. The next day, Emily was practically glowing with excitement. She kept sneaking off to make calls about the party. She asked what I was doing Saturday evening, and I said nothing major. She looked pleased and said great, she had a surprise for me. I needed to be at a specific address at 7 p.m. sharp. I said sure I'd be there. Saturday arrived and Emily spent the day prepping, hair appointment, nail appointment. She came home with bags from high-end stores. Her new dress, I figured. She spent over an hour on her makeup, put on jewelry, the whole deal. She looked stunning, honestly, like she was preparing for the event of her life, which I suppose she was. She left around 5 p.m. to set up the venue, reminding me to be there at 7 and not to be late. I watched her drive off in her car, the one I'd been paying for the past 3 years. Another thing she thought was hers. Another thing that legally wasn't. I got dressed, jeans, a button-up, nothing special. I wasn't aiming to impress anyone. I drove to the venue she'd given me and pulled into the lot at exactly 7 p.m. Through the windows, I saw a packed room. Emily had gone all out. I walked in and everyone shouted, "Surprise!" just as she'd planned. Balloons, decorations, and that liberation cake sat in the corner. I spotted the photographer angled to catch my reaction. Laura had her phone up, recording. Sarah and Claire stood near Emily, looking excited and tense. And there was Emily, center stage in her pricey dress, radiating triumph. She approached me, barely containing her grin, savoring the moment. She quieted the crowd and said she had a major announcement about her future, her joy, and putting herself first. The room hushed. The photographer aimed his lens. Laura kept filming. Emily locked eyes with me and said, "Surprise!" This wasn't a celebration with me. It was her celebration of freedom from me. She was leaving me. Done being tied to someone who couldn't support himself. Done carrying the financial load. Done pretending she was happy. She was moving on to someone who could offer her something real. People gasped. Some looked uneasy. Most seemed stunned. This wasn't what they'd expected from the invitation. Emily watched me, waiting for me to crumble, to beg, to give her the satisfaction of my devastation. I just smiled. And that's when her face started to shift. Update 1: the response to my first post has been intense, and I appreciate everyone who supported my actions. To address some questions, yes, this is real. No, I'm not fabricating it for attention. And yes, I know this is extreme. That's exactly what I intended. Here's what happened after I smiled at Emily in front of 30 people. Her confusion was immediate. She'd built this whole scenario in her mind about how I'd react, and my calm smile threw her off. She recovered quickly, though, saying it was typical that I couldn't even take this seriously, probably in shock or denial. I said I wasn't shocked at all. I'd overheard her planning everything Thursday evening with her friends. Every detail, the photographer, the cake, her speech, her boyfriend Nathan, who was apparently in the crowd waiting to step in. The room went silent. Emily's face turned from confused to furious in seconds. She accused me of spying on a private conversation, violating her privacy. I pointed out it's hard to miss when she's laughing about it in our living room. But sure, let's talk about violations. Sarah stepped in, telling me to calm down, that Emily had every right to leave a failing marriage, and I was manipulative for guilt-tripping her. I wasn't trying to make anyone feel anything. I was just done pretending. Emily doubled down, telling the crowd she was leaving me, and yes, seeing someone else because she deserved a man who could provide. She'd spent 8 years supporting a husband who couldn't hold a steady job. She'd carried us while I chased failed dreams. She was done being married to someone who brought nothing. And look, she wasn't entirely wrong. I did fail at multiple ventures. I was financially dependent on her for most of our marriage. Those are facts, but here's what she omitted. I told everyone that Emily had moved into my house 5 years ago when my grandmother left it to me. She'd lived there rent-free since. Every dollar she spent on expenses, she'd have spent on rent elsewhere, but instead, she got a 3-bedroom home in a nice area for free. I explained the house was in my name alone. Inherited property never added her to the deed. Legally, she had no claim. Emily paled. She called it absurd, saying it was our house. We'd lived there together for 5 years. She'd paid for utilities, groceries, everything. She had rights. I clarified that actually she didn't. I'd consulted a lawyer, and in our state, inherited property stays separate unless explicitly transferred, which it wasn't. She'd been living in my house as my wife, essentially a guest. The photographer stopped shooting. Laura lowered her phone. The crowd watched this unfold, not the show Emily had promised. Claire tried defending Emily, saying it didn't matter whose name was on the deed because they'd built a life there. Emily had invested in that home. I agreed she'd paid for utilities and groceries, and she could take anything she'd bought, but the house and anything I owned before the marriage stayed with me. Emily was panicking now. She asked where she was supposed to go. I said that wasn't my issue, but she might check with Nathan about his penthouse since she was moving up. That's when Nathan emerged from the back, looking uneasy. He stepped forward, arm around Emily as planned, but it looked pathetic now, not victorious. He called me unreasonable and vindictive, saying Emily deserved better. I asked how long he'd been sleeping with my wife. He said it wasn't relevant. I said it was, since I'd been paying for the phone she texted him with, the car she drove to meet him, and the roof over her head while she planned her exit. Emily called me cruel, said she'd stayed with me longer than she should have out of pity. She'd tried to help me succeed, but I kept failing. She'd had to accept I'd never be the partner she needed and deserved happiness elsewhere. I said she deserved happiness starting now because eviction papers would be served tomorrow morning, and she had 30 days to clear out. She said I couldn't do that. I said I could, and I was. Papers were filed. She'd be served at 9 a.m. Sunday. Emily started shouting, calling me spiteful, petty, cruel. Said this was why she'd fallen out of love with me. I was small and couldn't handle her outgrowing me. I stayed calm. It felt good to stop pretending everything was okay, to stop tiptoeing around her resentment. I'd spent 2 years watching her dismantle our bond, and I was done caring about her feelings. Sarah said Emily could stay with her while she sorted things out, that she didn't need to stay with someone who didn't value her. I said great. She should start making calls because her bank access was gone, and her phone would stop working in an hour when the plan I'd canceled shut off. Emily checked her phone. Her banking app failed. Her calls wouldn't connect. She looked at me, stunned and enraged. She accused me of trapping her with no resources. I pointed out she had her own accounts with her salary, which I'd never touched. She wasn't trapped, just cut off from my money and phone plan. Nathan said he'd take care of her. She didn't need me. He had resources and she'd be better off with him. I said perfect. He should take her to his penthouse tonight since she'd be evicted in 30 days. Emily was crying now, angry tears. She accused me of orchestrating this to humiliate her in front of everyone. I said she'd hired a photographer to capture my humiliation, so yes, I'd flipped her plan. I'd had years to prepare, and she'd given me the perfect moment to act. The party was dead. Guests stood awkwardly. The liberation cake sat untouched. Emily's big freedom moment had turned into her learning she'd lived in her husband's house for 5 years with no claim while plotting to destroy him. Laura suggested everyone leave to give us space. I said there was nothing to discuss. Emily wanted freedom and she was getting it, just not with my house, money, or phone plan. Emily vowed I'd regret this, that she'd fight the eviction, that her lawyer would prove her rights because she'd lived there and maintained it. I said she could try, but my lawyer confirmed my position was airtight. Inherited property, never added her to the deed. Nathan said they should go, that Emily didn't need to endure my attacks. I said I wasn't attacking, just refusing to fund my wife's lifestyle while she moved on to another man's penthouse. They left, Emily, Nathan, Sarah, Laura, and Claire. Most guests trickled out looking awkward and confused. I stayed to talk to the venue manager about cleanup. Emily had paid for the rental, so that wasn't my issue. I drove home to my house. The house that would soon be mine alone again. I'd lived there with Emily for 5 years and with my grandmother for 2 years before she passed. It had always been my space. Emily had just occupied it. Sunday morning, the process server arrived at 9 a.m. as planned. I'd left early for breakfast to let him do his job. When I returned at 10, the papers were served, and Emily had called Sarah to pick her up. My phone rang at 11. Not Emily, her phone was off. But Sarah, demanding to know why I was kicking Emily out of her home, cutting her off, treating her like a criminal for being honest about her feelings. I explained again that it wasn't her home, it was mine. She'd lived there as my wife, and now she wasn't, so she needed to find a new place. Sarah called me vindictive, saying this was why Emily wanted out, because I was petty and couldn't handle her success. I asked if she knew about Nathan. She said Emily's relationship with Nathan wasn't an affair because our marriage had been dead for years. Emily had tried to leave compassionately, but I'd forced her hand by being controlling. I hung up. I knew Emily wouldn't go quietly. She'd built a narrative of being the victim of a failed husband, and I'd shattered it. She'd fight to make me the villain, and I was ready. I'd spent 2 years preparing for this. Everything I did was legal, protecting what was mine. If she wanted to fight, she could try, but not from my house. Update 2, the comments keep asking what happened next and if Emily just accepted the eviction. Short answer, no way. She'd spent 8 years convinced she was the martyr, and she wasn't letting me rewrite that story without a battle. Monday morning, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. It was a lawyer Emily hired, a guy named Brooks, specializing in family law. He said he was representing Emily in our divorce and wanted to discuss dividing the marital home. I repeated that the house was inherited in my name only. There was no marital home to split. He called that a narrow view, saying Emily had claims based on her contributions to our household over our marriage. She'd paid for utilities, maintenance, upgrades. She'd lived there as my wife for 5 years, establishing it as her residence. I asked if he'd seen the deed or inheritance documents. He admitted he had, and the house was in my name, but argued that didn't negate Emily's spousal rights. I told him my lawyer had confirmed my stance, and if Emily wanted to fight the eviction in court, she could waste her money. Brooks got testy, saying I was acting out of spite, punishing Emily for ending an unhappy marriage. That my actions at the party and filing for eviction showed controlling, abusive behavior. I laughed. The woman who planned to shame me publicly while her affair partner waited was calling me abusive for not letting her live in my house for free. I told Brooks to have Emily communicate through him, but my stance was firm. The eviction stood. She had 28 days left. I hung up and my phone rang again, Emily, using Sarah's phone, furious. She'd just spoken to her lawyer and couldn't believe I'd force her into court. She'd spent 5 years making that house a home, and I was tossing her out like garbage. I reminded her she'd hired a photographer to capture my reaction to her leaving, that she'd planned a party to humiliate me, that she'd been seeing Nathan for 4 months while using my resources. So yeah, I was tossing her out. She said the affair didn't count because our marriage was dead for over a year. I'd emotionally abandoned her by being a failure. She'd tried to support me, but I kept failing. She needed a real partner, and Nathan provided that. I asked why she didn't just leave if the marriage was over. She said she was figuring out logistics, waiting for the right time, trying to spare my feelings because she knew I'd be crushed. I pointed out that hiring a photographer to capture my pain wasn't exactly kind. She said that was different, her way of reclaiming her strength after years of being dragged down by me. She needed that moment. We argued for nearly an hour. Emily kept trying to make me see her perspective, how hard it was for her, how much she'd sacrificed, how she deserved better. Some of it was fair. She had supported us financially for most of our marriage, but she'd also lived rent-free in a house that would have cost $2,000 a month elsewhere. I told her I understood she felt justified leaving. That was fine. But she wasn't taking my house. She wasn't taking anything of mine. She could take her clothes, her belongings, anything she'd bought, nothing else. She asked about the furniture, the couch, dining table, bedroom set. She said she'd bought most of it because I was broke when we married. I said fine, take what she paid for. I didn't care about furniture. She asked about the car. I'd made payments for 3 years. Was I taking that too? I said the car was in both our names, but I'd paid, so we'd sort it through lawyers. She could keep driving it but needed to refinance it in her name or buy me out. Emily started crying, saying I was stripping her of everything, being cruel and spiteful. That this wasn't the man she married. I said the man she married failed at 3 startups and relied on his wife financially. Maybe she was right, I'd changed. She hung up. Tuesday, Emily came to the house. I'd changed the locks Monday, but she pounded on the door, demanding to get her things. She needed to pack if I was forcing her out. I opened the door but didn't let her in. Told her she could come Saturday when I'd be there to oversee. She said she didn't need oversight in her own home. I said it wasn't her home, and yes, she did need oversight because I didn't trust her not to damage or take what wasn't hers. She called me ridiculous, saying she wouldn't wreck the house. I said she'd also told her friends she couldn't wait to see my pathetic face when she humiliated me, so I didn't trust her judgment. Emily's mom called Wednesday. I hadn't spoken to Brooks or Emily since Tuesday, and they'd escalated to family. Her mom said she'd always liked me and was sad about the divorce but thought I was handling it poorly. Emily was her daughter hurting, and I was making it worse by being harsh. I explained what Emily did, the party, the photographer, the affair, the plan to shame me. Her mom went quiet, then said that didn't sound like Emily. Her daughter wouldn't be that cruel. I told her to ask Emily or her friends who planned it. Her mom said even if true, it didn't justify kicking Emily out of her home. I repeated it wasn't her home. It was mine, inherited in my name only. Her mom said that wasn't fair. Emily had lived there, built a life there. I said paying expenses wasn't ownership, and if her lawyer wanted to argue in court, he could try. Her mom said I'd become cold, unrecognizable. I said good, maybe I'd changed. Maybe I was tired of being treated like a burden. Thursday, Emily returned with Nathan. He knocked and said we needed to talk. I said we didn't. He said this was affecting Emily's mental health, and I should reconsider the eviction. I asked how long he'd been sleeping with my wife. He said it wasn't relevant. I said it was, since he was on my porch asking me to let my wife live in my house while moving on with him. He said the affair started after our marriage was emotionally over. Emily was miserable, lonely, and he understood and valued her, could provide for her. I said great. He should provide by letting her move into his penthouse. He said his living situation was complicated. I asked what that meant. He admitted he lived with a roommate and it wasn't set up for Emily to move in. I laughed. Emily had bragged about Nathan's penthouse, how she was trading up from a loser to a high flyer, but the penthouse had a roommate and no space for her. Emily said this wasn't about Nathan's place. It was about me being cruel. She'd messed up with the breakup but didn't deserve to have her life ruined. I said I wasn't ruining her life, just not housing her while she moved on. Nathan called me unreasonable. Emily needed time to find a place and sort her finances. 30 days wasn't enough. I said 30 days was the legal requirement, and she'd already used 4 arguing on my porch instead of searching for an apartment. Emily said she couldn't afford a deposit and first month's rent because she'd spent her savings on the party, photographer, and new clothes. I said that was unfortunate but not my problem. Maybe Nathan could help since he cared so much. Nathan looked uneasy, saying he'd love to help but had financial commitments. Emily stared at him, realizing her upgrade couldn't deliver. They left, but I knew Emily wasn't done. She'd miscalculated everything, her exit, her affair partner, and wouldn't accept it. Friday, I ran into Claire at the grocery store. She approached me, saying we needed to talk about what I was doing to Emily. That Emily was crashing on Sarah's couch, unraveling, having lost her home, husband, and stability in a week. I said Emily hadn't lost anything she owned, just access to my things. Claire said that was a cold way to view a marriage. Couples share everything when they build a life together. I said we'd shared plenty. Emily lived rent-free in my house for 5 years, used my phone plan, bank accounts, car payments. Now she didn't. Claire said I was punishing Emily for being honest. I said I was protecting myself from someone who planned to shame me publicly. Claire said the party was a mistake, but Emily was reclaiming her power. I asked how she'd feel if her husband hired a photographer to capture her crying when he left her for someone else. She had no answer. Saturday, Emily arrived with Sarah to collect her things. I'd set a 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. window, and she showed up at 10 with a moving truck and 3 friends. I let them in and followed as they packed. Emily complained I was hovering, not trusting her. I said I didn't and I'd check everything they took. She grabbed clothes, shoes, jewelry, clearly hers, so I didn't object. Then she tried taking electronics I'd bought, a tablet, a laptop. I said those stayed. She argued she'd used them for years. I said they were mine, loaned to her. We fought over every item, the coffee maker, air fryer, blender. Emily claimed she'd bought most of it but had no proof. I told her to take the kitchen stuff. I didn't care about appliances. She could have anything not clearly mine. It took 6 hours. By the end, Emily had packed her clothes, some furniture she'd bought, kitchen items, and personal belongings. The house felt empty but lighter, cleaner. As she left, Emily stood in the doorway and asked if I was happy if this was what I wanted. I said I'd wanted a wife who didn't resent me, a partner who didn't plan my humiliation while cheating. Since I couldn't have that, I was fine with her leaving. She said I'd regret this, that she'd fight in court, that her lawyer said she had a case. I said her lawyer could try, but we both knew how this would end. The house was mine, always had been. She left, and I closed the door on 8 years. Final update: it's been 3 weeks since my last update, and people want to know if Emily moved out and how the eviction went. Yes, she's out, but it wasn't a clean exit. She fought me every step, which honestly made it more satisfying. First, her lawyer Brooks filed to block the eviction, arguing Emily had tenant rights from 5 years of residency and I couldn't just boot her out. My lawyer countered that I'd followed legal protocols and Emily wasn't a tenant. She was a spouse in my inherited property with no claim. We ended up in court 10 days after the eviction notice. Emily arrived with Brooks, looking polished and prepared. Her angle was to portray herself as the wronged wife who'd poured years into our home and marriage, only to be discarded when she sought independence. Brooks argued Emily's contributions, utilities, maintenance, upgrades, created a constructive trust or entitled her to compensation. My lawyer noted that paying expenses while living rent-free didn't grant property rights, and that Emily had saved at least $25,000 a year in rent. The judge asked Emily what improvements she'd made. She mentioned a water heater, landscaping, paint, minor repairs. My lawyer said those were standard maintenance any resident would cover, and Emily benefited from living in a nice house for free. The judge asked if Emily was on the deed or had any ownership agreement. Brooks admitted no, but argued marital property laws applied. The judge clarified that this was an eviction case, not a divorce, and the property was clearly separate. Emily cried in court, saying this was her home, where she'd built a life, and I was punishing her for wanting a divorce. The judge sympathized but upheld the law. The property was mine and the eviction stood. Emily confronted me outside court, saying I was smug, using technicalities to ruin her life because my ego couldn't handle her leaving. I said I was using the law and my property rights. She'd spent months planning to humiliate me, and now she was mad I wouldn't let her live in my house while doing it. She claimed she never meant to humiliate me, that the party was about her freedom, not hurting me. I reminded her of the photographer, the liberation cake, her laughing about my pathetic face. She said I'd eavesdropped and twisted her words. I asked what context justified photographing my pain. She said she was emotional, venting to friends, saying things she didn't mean. I said no, she meant every word when she thought I wasn't listening. Brooks pulled her away to discuss next steps. I went home to my house, which was staying mine. The next week, Emily scrambled to find a place. She'd been on Sarah's couch, but Sarah's hospitality had limits, and Emily complained about needing her own space. Her 6-figure salary didn't stretch far. She'd spent her savings on the party, clothes, and other exit plans, and hadn't saved much living rent-free. Tuesday, she called from a new number, asking about a payment plan to stay in the house a few months while she sorted finances. I said no. She offered market rent. I said the house wasn't for rent, and I wouldn't rent to her anyway. She said most apartments required upfront deposits she couldn't cover. I said that was her problem. She had 12 days left. She asked about the car. I said she could keep it if she refinanced it in her name. She said she didn't have time with everything else. I said she'd better make time because I wasn't paying anymore. She accused me of cornering her financially. I said she'd had 8 years to build her own stability and instead built resentment. Now she was free like she wanted. Thursday, Nathan showed up alone, wanting a man-to-man talk about Emily's situation. I said there was nothing to discuss. He said Emily was struggling and I was making it worse by being inflexible. I asked why he wasn't helping, given his supposed executive wealth. He admitted his finances weren't as solid, student loans, credit card debt, and his penthouse was a shared apartment. I asked if Emily knew. He said they discussed it. I said she'd jumped from one unstable situation to another, except with me, she had a free house. Nathan said he and Emily had a real connection. I said great, they could connect in whatever apartment she found, but not in my house. He asked what I wanted to give Emily more time. I said nothing. The deadline was final. He asked if I'd always been this cold. I said no, Emily had cured me of being accommodating. The weekend before the deadline, Emily came with her mom. Her mom appealed to my decency, saying Emily was falling apart and my retaliation was excessive. I said I wasn't retaliating, just not housing someone who didn't want to be my wife. Her mom said Emily had memories in the house. I said she could take those memories elsewhere. Her mom asked if I wanted Emily to beg. I said I wanted her out by Wednesday, 5 p.m., per the eviction order. Her mom said I'd changed for the worse. I said maybe, but at least I wasn't being walked over. Monday, Emily tried a new angle, asking to talk about our marriage, what went wrong, and if we could fix it. I said no. She suggested counseling, admitting she'd mishandled the breakup, but thought we could work through it. I asked if she was serious about counseling after a 4-month affair and a humiliation party. She said the thing with Nathan was over. They'd split when she realized he wasn't what she thought. I said that wasn't my problem. She said she'd been wrong about me, about what she wanted, about everything. I said the only path forward was her packing and leaving in 48 hours. She asked if I'd rather be alone than fix our marriage. I said yes. Alone was better than being with someone who planned to destroy me publicly. She said she never meant to destroy me, just wanted out of a miserable marriage. I said she got her wish. Tuesday, Emily's friends chimed in. Sarah sent a long message saying I was cruel, that Emily made mistakes but didn't deserve this punishment. I didn't reply. Laura called, leaving a voicemail saying Emily was unraveling and as a friend I should give her another month. I deleted it. Claire showed up at my workplace Wednesday morning. Security called me to the lobby. She said Emily was nearly homeless and I could stop it. I said Emily had family, friends, a high-paying job she'd manage. Claire said apartments wouldn't take Emily due to short notice, deposit issues, or the eviction on her record. I said she should have thought of that before the party. Claire said I needed to let go of the party. Emily had apologized. I said she apologized for getting caught, not for planning it. Claire called me impossible and left. Wednesday, 5 p.m., I was at the house to ensure Emily was out. She arrived at 4 with a moving truck, Sarah and Laura. They loaded her remaining clothes, books, and personal items. Emily kept looking at me, expecting me to stop her, to say it was a lesson. I didn't. At 4:45, she stood in the driveway, asking if this was really what I wanted. I told her to leave her key on the counter. She said she couldn't believe I'd become this person. I said I couldn't believe she'd hired a photographer to capture my pain, but here we were. She left the key and drove off. Sarah and Laura shot me dirty looks as they followed. I went inside and changed the locks again, just in case. The house was bare. Emily took her furniture, kitchen stuff, but it felt like mine again, free of her resentment. My lawyer called Thursday to confirm the eviction was done, asking if there were issues. I said no, Emily was out. He said to call if she caused trouble. I think she's done fighting. She lost and knows it. This was intense. Planning it for 2 years was one thing, executing it was another. Watching Emily realize her grand exit backfired, that her affair partner couldn't deliver, that she'd blown up her marriage and lost her housing, it was something. People ask if I feel bad for her. Honestly, no. She planned to shame me in front of 30 people, hired a photographer to capture my pain, laughed about what a loser I was, cheated for months while living in my house. Everything she's facing is because of her choices. I didn't make her throw a party, hire a photographer, or cheat. I just stopped bankrolling her while she did it. People keep asking about the divorce. It's moving forward. Emily's lawyer is pushing for her to get something, but my lawyer's confident we can keep things separate. She gets her salary and the car if she refinances. I keep my house, accounts, everything I had before. Emily sent one last message Friday, saying she hoped I was happy, that I'd ruined everything we'd built, that she'd never forgive me. I didn't reply, but I wanted to say we didn't build anything. I inherited a house and she lived in it while resenting me. I'm done with Emily, her contempt, her victim narrative. She wanted freedom and got it, just not with my house. To everyone following, this is likely the last update unless something major happens. Emily's out. The eviction's done. The divorce is proceeding. I kept my property, my dignity, and my right to stop supporting someone who despised me. That's enough.